My name is Matt, and I will be talking with Chris Lowe about effective strategies for building a strong engineering culture and insights on leveraging consulting experience in corporate leadership. I think before we start our short conversation today and the interview, it would be great if you could give like a brief introduction to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Chris Lowe. I'm the Vice President of Application Engineering, currently at a commercial insurance company called Amerisure Insurance. We're headquartered in Metro Detroit here in the United States. And in this function, I lead all of our software development and maintenance activities, our automation and cloud adoption, and most recently starting some of our AI. What does it mean for us as a company? Pretty much just like every other company in the world nowadays. Prior to Amerisure, I did spend 14 years at USAA, which is a Fortune 100 financial services company focused on the military. So banking, insurance, auto, home, and life and annuities. So a lot of different products. And then outside of the both of these corporate roles, I've also started and exited two consulting companies along the way. A lot of different experiences that I plan on touching on today that I think will be really interesting for your audience.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And the first question that I want to ask you, it's related to your experience, of course, but you implemented the solutions on quite a big scale because on a USAA before, you influence the insurance and banking services, banking products for the military, which is like a huge kind of market to serve.
Yeah, it's a big group. Yeah.
Yeah, so and you implemented a few innovative experiences, and even you had some patents. For example, you mentioned to me like medical records on a blockchain, which is kind of like an innovative thing. So I'm just wondering, in your case, if you have a problem to solve and you handle it with really innovative solutions, how do you approach it? How do you choose? The tech stack to serve those clients that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think this is where some of my consulting experience and background came in, right? Which is really thinking about how do you find the right answer to the problem that the business has or your customers have, and matching that back with a technology stack, either depending on your constraints, maybe it's make it work on something we have now, or if it's a little more blue sky or greenfield, as they say, then you can think about what is the best technology for this, the best of breed technology. I do think there's a difference when we start talking about innovation versus invention, right? So everyone in the world can innovate on something, right? I have a new idea, or instead of clicking this button, maybe I can do this instead, and I don't have to click that button at all anymore, right? This incremental change, I think, is really what drives a lot of that value, and including our work on the blockchain. Just give you a little bit more of an example, right? Back in the 2000s and 2010s, right? Blockchain got very popular, and there's a lot of hype around it. And we saw a lot of companies kind of move to say, what are we going to do with blockchain? And USA was no exception in terms of thinking about how could this apply to us in a financial services industry. And I think we saw that there was a lot of hype, but not a whole lot of fruit that bared out of that. And once the hype died down, you got into some very valuable, meaningful applications. There were a lot fewer. Many companies ruled it out because it wasn't valuable to them. But what was left was some really valuable things. One example that might be familiar to many people is there's actually a belief that Apple uses blockchain as part of their encryption process for end-to-end iMessage encryption. So how they encrypt their text messages potentially is with this very powerful blockchain technology underneath. And if I just take it a step further, I think AI is going through something very similar right now, right? This whole Gen AI movement and AI in general, been around for a while with AI, but we see a lot of hype right now, a lot of noise. I saw you had just recently posted a new study that just came out on massive investments, but without a whole lot of results coming back yet. And, I think the thing that I worry about the most is in the hype, you tend to lose some of the foundational things that make good technology decisions, right? The engineering practices, the product market fit ideas, right? Around, is this the right thing to do? And those still matter, right? And I think effective leaders and engineers, whether you're in the consulting world or even in the corporate world, they have to be able to talk about both, and good ones do that, right? To balance, here's all the things that have to be true before we have this right technology. while also getting us to this point of keeping up with the market, the industry, the hype, the innovation. Right, it's finding that balance is the most critical.
Oh, thank you for that. I really like your approach that you always start from the problem, and you emphasize this. So because the blockchain, it could be seen, or back then it could be seen as something like really on a hype, right? But
Mhm.
you always start with the problem. And the second question I wanted to ask you is around your experience exactly with the agency and the consulting. So you mentioned you work on an agency, like on the consulting side. You made some exit there. And I'm just wondering how this experience shaped you and how this helped you with the current or the previous role.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I've been driven by this quote from Steve Jobs, right, as the founder and CEO of Apple, and he said, I want to say it was in the mid 2000s. He had a quote that was, Apple sits at the intersection of technology and fine arts, or liberal arts, I believe. And so it's about being in this crossroads, right, where I have this experience, right. We could be a technology company, but if the technology company doesn't consider anything else, right, any other industries or how it kind of mashes together, then it's not as valuable, right? And that's what's really driven me as part of that consulting experience, and then bringing it back into the corporate world, is I've gained experiences for things that I never would have thought about or talked about before. One example I'll give you, when I was in the consulting space, is we built an app for the state of Colorado, the Department of Natural Resources, which runs all of the park systems in the state, wanted to build a system and a platform for hikers and skiers and people that are out in the mountains and in the fields, to report back, kind of a distributed way to say, what are the conditions like today, right? The state doesn't have enough employees to go into every mountain range or every hill or walking trail and say, is it good? And so they wanted to leverage the power of the crowd to do that. And so we built an application, and a platform to help them do that. And one of the things that I love the most about it is I got to go and interview, hikers and skiers. And as somebody that's not really an outdoorsy person, I got to learn this whole new world that existed way outside of my purview. And I think that's the power of consulting, right? Is you get to experience a lot of different slices of life, and then bringing that back into the corporate world. I really think about three things. There's a phrase out there that says the luckiest people are the ones that work the hardest, right? So the ones that try the most, try new things, try different things. Maybe we're innovating or inventing, or we just want to put out really high quality work. Tend to be luckier at getting things started or getting new opportunities or being on that bigger project. And in the consulting world, especially having started the consulting company, um, you know, if you don't put in the work, you don't grow, right? It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen that way. And so, bringing that back into the corporate world, you really get to focus on, I'm gonna drive, right, that entrepreneurial or entrepreneurial spirit. I think is one thing. The second thing is that you never have perfect information, right? You make the best choice you can at the time. And coming from consulting, right, there's a couple different frameworks that are out there. You can easily look them up, like on YouTube. McKinsey has quite a few videos out there on how they structure strategic research. So being able to problem solve and not rush in, especially in an engineering context, not rush in to start coding right away, right? If I don't understand the problem or how we're going to bring the solution to market, it doesn't really matter. And so that really, was meaningful to me in a consulting space now as an executive, for over a software group, right? It's not about the software that my team builds. It's about the value and solutions we provide back to the business. And then the last piece I would say is the curiosity about outcomes, right? So if you care deeply about the problem you're trying to solve, we had one vendor that we work with that sends us a survey every year, right? Say, how are we doing as a partner for you? And they ask, are we considered a vendor, an implementer, or a partner? And they really strive to be the partner level of things, because it goes beyond contracts and dollars and people, and more about, we're going to solve this shared problem together because we really care about your work. And so I think, again, bringing all those back in from a consulting context makes for a really successful, individual contributor, but also leaders, right, in the engineering space. And it's been great for me.
But But I'm very sure you run the team of around 200 people together with contractors, more or less. Am I correct?
Yeah, we're running right now. I've got about 60 FTEs and about 120 or so third party, contractors.
Okay, and regarding the culture, this is interesting to me. Like based on what you said, probably you have some kind of things or rules that are important for you regarding the culture, and like what is it, and like how do you implement it with the engineering team? What is your approach here?
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for culture, and it's actually one of the first assignments that I picked up when I joined the company was kind of leading the banner charge for this engineering culture that we needed to establish, because that's really in the modern world for a technology company or a company that wants to leverage technology the best. They have to have really robust engineering cultures, right? We have to care about the problems that we have today, but also how is that going to scale and be solved for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 10 years from now? And how do we keep it current, right? We keep all of our technology up to date. And so I think the culture comes in a couple different ways. First is you have to have a mix of what I would call a groundswell and a top-down approach. So I can't show up to my teams and say, guys, today we're going to be collaborative culture. This is our new culture. We're collaborative, right? I think as you address engineering culture and just culture in general from a top-down perspective, you really have this concept of the shadow of the leader, right? So does the leader model good behaviors? Do they talk about the things that matter to them? When I talk to my engineering leaders that report to me, we often talk about if you're not asking your team how well they're doing in code reviews or design reviews, or how well are they working with architecture, I don't expect my leaders to be doing code reviews, right? I don't need them to be doing that. We have a solid engineering team that can do that, and the leads should do that. But if the managers never ask about it or they never talk about it, then we don't actually have the insight to know, are we doing the right things? Are we healthy in what we're doing? And so I think asking those questions, being passionate, like I just mentioned in the last example, being curious about how we solve these problems, whether it's a business problem or, hey, how are we solving this API design so that we know there's a new system coming next year? How are we going to replace the old system with the new system for this, right? These maybe somewhat simple or basic questions get people to think about these problems, but also sets the tone that, oh, this is something we should all be mindful of. And so when I, for example, I've been working on taking my AWS solution architecture certification. And whenever I'm talking with my teams, like, could be a college hire, for example, I talk about my continuing education, right? The way that I continue to invest, because again, as a shadow of the leader concept, if they see me investing in myself and learning new things and talking about how excited I am about this Gen AI course I just took, then it reinforces that A, not only is it okay, and they should do that too, but B, that's the kind of culture we want because the leaders are doing it too. The other thing that I think leaders can control is the incentive model. So, our objectives align to a better engineering culture, as in this example? Are your goals to do that? Are the people we're promoting championing the right culture for us? Right, because people watch and they know, like if that person over there gets promoted, but they're really kind of a jerk to work with, then we're telling everybody else, like, if you're really good at coding, it's okay if you're a jerk, because that's what we value is more productive output, right? And so the incentive model is really important to get right. From the bottoms up perspective, where I think the culture really changes is you find the people that care, right? You find the people that want to do better. So we have a lead engineer that we hired last year that had a ton of .NET experience. We're a .NET shop. And so, he came in and we asked him to do an assessment. What's our code base look like for a bunch of our different systems? And he had a whole host of recommendations of things, right, that we should do. And so we spent 6 months empowering him with, we brought in new tools, new processes. We changed one of our approval processes to align to the feedback that somebody who was passionate enough to care about this process and gave us feedback, we enabled them, right? So now we're showing that other people who have ideas, we want them to speak up too. And so removing their obstacles, we're getting them power in their voice helps with that groundswell, right? Because now not only are we setting the right measurements to say you're successful if you're working this way, but now we're giving them the tools to do that, right? And now they're feeling empowered. And then I think the last piece of this is giving them an outlet to leadership, right? If you're on the floor, do I feel like I can go to my my boss's boss, or can I go all the way up to the CIO and express some opinion about how I think things should be done? So the open borders, the open doors, the transparency into leadership and getting your voice heard, and that we actually take the feedback and do something with it. I can't fix everything, of course, but especially if there's multiple people feeling a certain way, we should listen and adjust to that. I think that's how you drive and enable that engineering culture.
The examples that you gave during the top-down approach about like leading by example, it's really funny because yesterday I talked with my wife and we were thinking like how to convince like kids to do something that like to have like healthy habits, for instance, right? We noticed that our daughter, she's ordering the water instead of like a can of Coke, right? During when we go for lunch. In compared to other kids, and even like she has the ability to do it, but like this is lead by example because each time me or my wife when we go for lunch, we order our water, and she's doing the same, despite of this that the other kids are doing. And this is like really simple, like a human behavior, I think, and the same with the top-down approach, right? You lead by example, you show like the culture by doing the things, so and you cultivate it. So it makes a lot of sense.
I think two things just real quick on that. One is, naturally there is a psychological element where people want to fit in, right? They don't want to stand out from the crowd generally. Just kind of our human innate, right? If you stand out, then sometimes bad things happen, right? You get picked on or you get called out, right? Like and you see it in herds of animals and in Africa and things where the ones that the slowest gazelle kind of thing, right? They want to be in the crowd, and so you're looking for those groups around you, right? What are other people doing? And then I think to your point, as you model that behavior, it's also reinforcing, right? It's very easy for us to say, I don't like that thing, right? You shouldn't get a Coke every time we go to lunch. But we spend significantly less time saying, hey, great job in getting that water. I really like that you're thinking about the choices you make, right? And that reinforcement behavior goes a long way, right? To say, I like this, and that's what I'm promoting for other people. I think that's a great example.
And I have a feeling that you have really interdisciplinary experience, right? But there are a lot of domains that are so different and broad, so you cannot be expert in everything, right? So I'm just wondering, what is your approach to get to win the trust, to achieve the outcomes that you want when you are not an expert in a certain area?
Yeah, I think it's it's nearly impossible to be an expert in everything. So you'll come across this quite a bit, and especially if I go back to my consulting time, I worked in 6 different verticals or industries, and so coming from financial services and insurance, when I'm trying to advise a partner in oil and gas industry, for example, we had some projects there. I had to do a lot of research, right? I think the first and most important thing is you have to try to make sure that you're putting in the work, right? If people can see that you are becoming knowledgeable of their space, then you demonstrate that you care. And even if you're not the expert, I think you also get a pass in some regards where people see that you're trying, right? Hey, I read this article, or I took this class, I'm trying to understand your world. They become a lot more patient and a lot more open to those conversations and what's happening. And people love talking about their space and what they do. And so if you're curious, I think those doors open really well, especially if there are areas you don't really know anything about, or maybe you have leadership oversight, but I can't necessarily drive their outcomes. Again, doing that research first and understanding as much as you can about that domain is critical. I think you then come with ideas, right? You come with ideas and not solutions. So I don't understand your domain, but as I used that example before of that intersection, like with Apple and technology and liberal arts, right? That I have this idea, I did this thing in my other role or in another life. I did this thing, and I wonder if it would work here, right? Is you kind of offer solutions, but you're soliciting the experts and the people that report to you in this example for their advice, and could this work? And you could challenge them if they're saying, "Oh, that will never work here." Right? As a leader, especially, you have to try to overcome those objections, but not by saying this is the thing you have to do, but more of here's my experience. How does it fit here? Right? And you learn and build that trust over time. I think the other side of it is that you want to be vulnerable and talk about, I know this and I don't know this, and I need you guys or guys and girls to help me with this. And that's how we're going to be successful. And your job as a leader is to paint the bigger picture, right? How does your role affect the company and our strategic objectives, or how do you provide value ultimately to our customers? That's what a leader can do, regardless if they know the domain or not. Right, is to say, here's why you matter, and try to connect the employees back to some bigger mission that's bigger than themselves. I think it's a lot of buy-in, and it gives you some time to then figure out what the domain is all about, right? And how do you bring that value?
And let's continue this discussion about the results and the outcomes in a different, let's say, combination. I mean, nowadays, I think the really successful companies are those who can create the value and the outcomes as on a cross section of different departments, right? So you have the marketing and sales. To make it successful, you need like both puzzles. You cannot live in a silos, right? The same with engineering and product. But sometimes it's really hard to influence, to get the results when you work like hand in hand with a different department. So I don't know, do you have your own approaches? How do you impact the department, like other department with which you are working, to get and drive the results that you want to get as a company or as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. Similar to the last question of we can't know everything, you also are unlikely to own everything, right? And if you do own everything, then you're probably going to be not very effective at getting the results from 2 or 3 levels down, because there's so much. And so it's critical that you have those good relationships. I think first and foremost, I would say one of my management secrets, and what I tell a lot of my staff that report to me, right, is that don't let the first time you call somebody be when you have a problem. And I think that that's really powerful, right? Because if I become known for the problem guy, I only call you when I need something, or when something's broke, or there's bad news, right? Then there's not a whole lot of positive emotions about my role in the company. And so I think building those relationships, investing in could be simple conversations, even like this, right? And we've had chats just getting to know each other. Could be the traditional lunch or coffee, or right, where those touch points I think become really important to say, let's get familiar with each other, then we can talk about the work, and figuring out the style of people, right? Maybe some people just want to talk about work, and you can jump in and be effective. But I've found in my experience, the vast majority of people want some amount of human connection, right? Maybe not best friends, but some amount that normalizes our relationship. And then I think there's back to maybe the psychology examples that we've been talking about is really important, because there's always the consideration of, why do I care and what's in it for me, right? Now, I don't think people are going around consciously saying, what's in it for me? Like, how are you going to make my life better? But I think there is a consideration of, I've got a full backlog, I've got a ton of stuff to do. Like, why is this important? Where should I put this? And so understanding why I'm asking you for something, and maybe bring it back to that bigger picture. Here's what happens if we work together. This is great. If we don't work together, this is the doom and gloom that awaits, right? And we really got to figure out how to make this successful. Fear is a big motivator, right? The fear of losing out on something versus that we accomplish some goal is a good goal, but also missing the goal is a big motivator. You have to pick your battles, right? And so as you want to work with groups together, you align your outcomes and your incentives. You also have to realize you're not going to win everything, right? And so finding the hill to die on, if you will, or the hill to charge, whatever the phrase is, I think becomes really important to make sure that you find the things that are valuable and meaningful, and the dance of you're gonna win some things, I'm gonna win some things, and that's how we both stay happy.
Regarding the incentives, so Warren Buffett once said, like, show me the incentives and I'll tell you what people will do, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
regarding the point number 2 that you mentioned, it's I think it's really like a simple human behavior, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you is regarding the challenges. And I have two topics that I want to tackle, but the first one, let's start with the first one. I'm just wondering, like 2024, what are the biggest challenges for you? What are the biggest pain points related to engineering and product delivery?
Yeah, the biggest pain point. So I think from there's a macro and a micro perspective, right? So in the macro's perspective, you have things like AI that are depending on what you believe, it's either a lot of hype or this is going to change the world, right? So we have these outside pressures that suddenly everybody needs to talk about. There's changing customer experience needs. So in the commercial insurance space, we're generally not very digitally focused today. Now we want to be, and so we have, especially at Amerisure, we have a digital strategy that we're working on implementing. But the products we sell are very complex, and so people generally don't want to go onto a website and say, I want this policy, because you might be putting out, $500,000 a year for this policy that you're going to buy. You almost certainly want to talk to somebody for about it for something, right? And so we're working on finding that right balance of what does the customer need, where they want to talk to a human and have an answer, coupled with let's make sure enough is available online or distributed in some fashion so that they get the information that they want when they want it. But if they still have questions, we're there for them too, right? So finding that balance. Commercial insurance is a pretty reliable business. Insurance in general, I think, weathered the COVID storm fairly well. In the commercial insurance space, for example, we specialize in manufacturing and construction as our two big pillars at Amerisure. And during COVID, right, both of those industries were generally considered essential industries, and so they kept functioning. So from a macro environment, I think we've been able to weather it fairly well. But now we're seeing the back end of that, where inflation is very high. We're seeing long lead times for fixing vehicles, for example, which drives up the cost of everything. From I have to have a rental vehicle longer now, but my parts to my bumper cost more. By the way, it's being shipped in from China, so now the shipping delays are causing problems, which everything just kind of exacerbates through that. So I think the delivery, if I bring it back full circle to your question, the delivery perspective, we have to consider what's happening outside, and are the things that we're working on still the right things, right? And then that may change. We don't want to have what we would call the whipsaw effect, which is back and forth. Oh, this thing happened today, or this thing happened this quarter. You need some stability, but you also can't be oblivious to the world around you. I think the internal perspective, or the micro, or the opposite of the macro perspective, is internally, you never have enough resources, right? You never have enough people, you never have enough time to do things. And so, right, the focus on technical hygiene becomes that much more important when we think about delivery. The analogy I use with my teams is, we're a world-class steakhouse, right? We want to sell the best steaks in the world. But when those steaks come out and the plates are dirty, or the glass is chipped, or there's a mouse that runs through the kitchen and you can see it from your table, nobody's going to want to eat there, right? And so in this maybe weird analogy, right, we can put out the best software we've ever built. It's scalable, it's maintainable, it does everything the business wants. But if we didn't invest enough in automation or continuous integration and delivery in our DevOps world, if we didn't invest enough in smart architectural patterns, then eventually it's going to break down. It doesn't matter. The things that surround the steak aren't good enough to make the steak that valuable. And so that, like I said, that's where I think the delivery focus comes from in today's world. And finding those technologies like AI could really help with that. I think we're seeing a lot of awesome advances in the software development space with AI, things like Copilot, or ChatGPT and Claude are coming out with really stellar. Take this piece of code, tell me what's wrong with it. Take this piece of code and create my documentation for it. Really supercharging what developers can do. And so I think in a product delivery space, we can go faster, but also take some of the mundane stuff away from a developer that allows them to really focus on adding that value while balancing the technical hygiene required for it.
What is the toughest thing, of you being in your position that maybe not all the people are seeing from the outside, or maybe it's not obvious from the outside. Like, what do you think are the toughest aspects of your role?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. The first, especially, I'm ambitious. I'm very happy with the role that I'm in, and eventually one day there should be more, right? And we figure out what's happening. And so I think from the perspective of a challenge, for me personally, right, is that every company has an ebb and a flow, and so you have to find the ability to either create change internally, or you have to learn to adjust to the pace that the company can move at. I mentioned our digital strategy work. We had started some of that early socialization almost 2 years ago at this point, because we knew that the lag time to build the momentum to say this is something we really should be doing, we should be investing, was going to take time, right? And so for somebody that wants to go fast and say let's go do it now, let's go spin up another $10 million project, let's go deliver, that's not going to happen. And so you really got to figure out how to pace your change and help the company move with you. And so I think that's a big challenge, especially being over our engineering group. I'm considered middle management, and so we're in this middle ground, if you will, that we have a responsibility to deliver the things that my group does, while also helping our C-suite and the leaders above me to get their results, right? And so finding that, again, that ebb and flow, I think is really important. Something that I actually included as part of my interview process, right? So we talk a lot about culture, responsibilities, HR talks about benefits, and those are all critical things. But I think one of the most important things you can do when you're interviewing for a company, or like I said, what I do in my interviews, is trying to find how comfortable are people with that ebb and the flow, right? Does the pace they want to work at match our company? And that may be very fast, and maybe they don't want to move that fast. They don't like chaos, but it also may be slower than what they're used to, right? Maybe they came from a startup, and commercial insurance is not a startup world generally, and so we got to find that right balance. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would say about what's tough about my role, maybe that we don't talk about a lot, is there's a saying that it's lonely at the top, and being that, like, if you're the CEO, right, you're one of one. It's hard to talk to other people, and I think in many of the roles that's true even down the organization, right? So if you use the example of it's lonely at the top, and that's 100% lonely, then maybe 2 levels down it's 50% lonely, right? In my role, and so not lonely in the terms that like nobody wants to talk to you, right? It's not lonely that way. But when you look around and you try to figure out your support network, right? Of, hey, I have this problem. Who can I talk to about this? And, where can I go to for an outlet and for help? And for many bigger companies, the enterprise grade companies, there's just generally a lot of people in roles like yours. So you can get some more feedback. But, like in my company, I'm the only one that runs the software delivery organization. So I have great peers, and I do consult with them. But they can't always understand the problems that I'm having, just like I can't always understand their problems, and so it can be a little lonely that way. I would say one of the other things that matter the most to me is as you create that peer group that works around you and helps you. I'm very fortunate. My boss is our CIO, and he was in a role that was similar to mine previously, and so we can connect very well, right, in terms of the problems we have and the challenges. So for me, I have that outlet, but there's other organizations where for example, IT reports into the CFO, and generally, in my experience, there's been a lot of incentive misalignment, right? Because IT is generally considered more of a cost center when it reports into a financial function, and so then it becomes more lonely, right? Because you have less outlet that way. So not necessarily to turn this into like a therapy session, but I think that doesn't get talked about enough, right? Is how do you build that support for the role you need, so that you can have ideas and that stress relief and that outlet to get help if you need it.
Yeah, I really feel what you are saying. It's lonely at the top. I really experience it because I have only one co-founder, and usually Those are two of us that are talking like really, openly about all the stuff.
Right.
And like we are, nobody is coming and saying like, "Hey, good job," right? So either me or my
Right.
co-founder, we say that to each other. So it's not an easy position. So and I absolutely agree. Not many people are talking about it. But this is how it is. This is the life of this kind of stage.
Yeah. Yeah. So the life you sign up for a little bit.
And let's talk about the tough and hard experience, because I think the biggest lessons learned are coming from those areas where we experience something hard in our career. And I'm just wondering, in your case, do you remember those hard things, those situations that were really tough, and the lessons learned that you have got from them? And the last question that I wanted to ask you, and I asked all of my guests, is regarding the resources, maybe books, conferences, podcasts, something that have been particularly influential on yourself, on your journey as a tech leader. If you could mention some of those resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big believer in being a well-rounded leader, well-rounded engineer. Back to that intersection, right? Really, really influences my life. And so I'll give you three recommendations because I think it's important to have that balance. So from a personal perspective, I'm a huge advocate for there's a group called Charity Water. They pioneered the 100% of your donations to them go to the field. They have a separate group that they fundraise with to fund their operations. And the water crisis and people not having clean water is quite a weird problem to have in 2024. So I'm a big advocate for them. And their CEO actually wrote a book called Thirst, which is about how he kind of grew up and got into the charity world and starting Charity Water. So that for me it's kind of a passion book in terms of finding your life's purpose and finding things to help you change the world and scrapping things together, right? He started it in New York with, just getting friends to donate and to coming up with all these pop-up events. So really, really, I think a very interesting book for perspectives on life. Again, this book called Thirst. From a professional perspective, I give every new leader that I come across a copy of the book, The First 90 Days. And I think it's a fantastic book for situational awareness, right? One of the key things it talks about in the first 90 days is figuring out the situation that you're joining and how do you respond to it, right? So if your company is, let's use the classic example of like joining Blockbusters versus joining Netflix, right? If you're joining Netflix, you're in a hyper growth stage. You're trying to figure out what to do. Maybe you're dealing with a lot of broken infrastructure as you scale and you can't keep up with the demand, right? You need to respond as a leader a certain way, different than if you're joining Blockbuster around that same time in the 2000s, around we're hemorrhaging sales, our infrastructure can't keep up because maybe it's older, it's not cloud based, right? You have a very different response to how you should lead in that example. And so the book, The First 90 Days, the middle section of the book talks all about this curve they outline and where should you be. So I think it's a phenomenal book to get started. And then from a technology perspective, there's a book called Clean Architecture by Robert Martin that talks about how to design effective systems. And I actually recommend it to all of my engineering leaders. I think, like you said, in our world, I'm not as interested in my leaders being able to code or to be hands-on with the code, but they should absolutely be able to talk about architecture with the team, right? Did we think about how these systems would interact? Did we optimize for this interaction or this connection, and really thinking about architecture in a seamless way. Good architecture will allow us to get over a lot of bad coding if we can get the systems to work correctly the first time. So I think Clean Architecture is a great book for that. So that's how I stay balanced, and that's how I'd recommend other people balance as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chris, for all the meaty answers. I really appreciate it. And wish you all the best in your career.
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely. Best of luck to you as well. Thank you.
Follow Matt on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Better Tech Leadership newsletter.